Summit in Chicago. Joining me now is actor, activist, human being extraordinaire, member of the Real News Board, Danny Glover. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, nice to be here, Paul.
So you just spoke and you called for a new radicalism. Talk about what that new radicalism is, what you think that might look like today, but also how does that jive with what most people here, certainly many of the speakers and Bernie Sanders, are fighting within the Democratic Party? How does the new radicalism relate to a fight within the Democratic Party?
Well, I mean, that's work that has to be done. But we've always seen how that radicalism pushed the envelope. If we look at King's decision around his opposition to the war in Vietnam was something that was pushed forward or moved forward by young members of SNCC, young members of the anti-war movement, by conscientious objectors, by a whole host of people, by socialists. You know, so the space has to open up, you know. And if we look at the movement, we look at the movements that we've paid attention to, they've been throughout our lifetime, they've always been pushed by other elements. They only achieve or accomplish what they do because they're pushed by other elements. So what does that look like in terms of that? We see some of it, Black Lives Matter, the color of change, we can go to the Dream Defenders, we see the Occupy movement, but now we have other examples that I think are international. What has happened in the UK is huge, not only for the UK, people of the UK, but it gives us another ally. That radicalism has to come out in the connection with internationalism as well. So we cannot talk about democracy here without talking about what is happening around the rest of the world and the ways in which we undermine and support support regime change, and support all the other kind of things to destabilize not only the democratic process within that country, the historic democratic process, as King says, King's always said, the arc of history is moving toward justice. It's always moving toward justice. And so what do we do in supporting that? So we cannot support our democracy here and without supporting the attempts to claim or reclaim the democracies in other places as well, you know, and self-determination as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
So when I'm thinking about that, and it's hard in all the muck that we're dealing with now. Trump said this, Trump did that. Someone respond to that. It's confusing in some sense. And I think it's distracting as well in terms of building what we do. Yes, we talk about resistance. Yes, it's important, but resistance is only the first step. What is the transition? We talk about truth to power. If we're talking about speak truth to power, then what does the truth that we speak truth to power, what is the truth that we want to align ourselves with as we build a new society, as we build a new world? What is that truth?
You talk about the need for having a view of the world as you fight within the United States. There's a very serious developments taking place in the world. This big arms deal with Saudi Arabia, the diplomatic attack on Qatar. It seems like it's not that there's anything progressive about Qatar, but it seems like Qatar didn't want to sign on to the page of a full-on either fight, attack, or undermining of Iran. Trump and Bannon have called for a bloody war against Islamic fascism, Islamic terrorism. The drumbeat for war is building.
It's beating up.
But we're not hearing too much about it here at the summit.
Well, that's the problem with the way we look at the situation. You know, the issue is simply we look as if at ourselves as if we're in a cocoon. Our struggle doesn't happen in a cocoon. It happens with other factors that are international factors around the world as well. Nobody's talking about that, but look at the idea of the impending conflict that is happening with China. You know, the territory disputes and all those kinds of militarization of the Pacific, bordering China. Look at all those things that happen because of that. So there's something else. The idea that this faction, this group of neocons, this group, you know, and there's some distinction between the past groups and everything else.
Although I got to say, this group, meaning Trump, Pence,
Trump.
When it comes to Iran, are quite on the same page of Chuck Schumer and his group.
Oh yeah, of course they are. You know what I'm saying? In that regard. But on the other hand, what are we thinking about in terms of what does the world look like now? And I think we're still dealing with the issue of the crisis of capital. If we're dealing with this crisis right now, how does that crisis now, in this shape, reshape the reality for not only us here, but the reality for the rest of the world as well?
One of the weaknesses of the Sanders election campaign is it took some time before black voters kind of got a sense of who he was. And young black voters, near the end of the campaign, started, I think, get excited, or many of them, about the campaign.
Yeah.
But has there been a building on that? When I look around the People's Summit here, there's certainly black participants, but not in big numbers. Is there still some kind of a disconnect?
Well, that's a major question, you know, Paul. I mean, that's a major challenge for this, you know, and part of the reason why some of us are here, who have some sort of connection, whether real or fantasy, with the black community, are here to talk about that. You know, I mean, there's a sense that in some groups that people still believe that we're the reason why. Those who supported Trump are the reason why Hillary lost and everything. There's that kind of misinformation and miscommunication in terms of that. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what this, as Harry Belafonte called it, where's the black rebel voice? He's said that many times, you know, where's his black rebel voice? How does it now, does it become, in some sense, subverted? Wherever it is, wherever it finds its face, wherever it finds elements of it arising and everything, becomes subverted, commercialized in some sort of way. I noticed that a great deal of the films are talking about, in some sort of way, deal with the crack cocaine in LA. There's a new film going to deal with crack cocaine in LA, dealing with the Detroit riot and all that revolved in anything. I mean, 50 years after the Detroit riot and everything else. But where, I don't know that yet. I don't know where's our capacity to, in our sense, take our next step in our own political evolution at this particular point in time. How do we work inside and outside of that? And how do we find the Bob Moses, the Diane Nashes, the Fannie Lou Hamers, and all those who in some sense were that black radical voice that we saw at a critical time in the mid-'60s, in the early '60s and everything. The question becomes that.
There's a kind of debate going on about how much energy, effort do people put into primarying corporate right-wing Democrats and waging this fight in the Democratic Party versus organizing movement building in the streets, other kinds of organizing, even third-party efforts. What's your view on that?
That's always an option in a sense. I gave the example of Eugene Debs, who ran as a socialist when he was in prison in 1918 and everything. There's always the option of that. The question is that how do we now, in some sense, take power? What does it mean to take power? What does it feel like to take power? I don't know if we've ever had. There have been opportunities. There have been moments of real crisis in this country where you've actually taken state power. You know. We saw what happened in Latin America when they took state power, and how the right wing resurfaced and everything else. It was even more vicious than before. So the question is that how do we deal with that? Are we, in a sense, still centered around the margins of power, in a sense, and believing that there's some way in which we can transform the system? If the system is a system of economics that has kind of put us in a situation, has put the planet in the situation it is, has put us as human beings into the situation where we are on the brink of our own survival, trying to find our own survival. What does that mean, you know, in a sense? And I don't think, we have to find the courage to really figure out what it means, and then use the appropriate actions, however dangerous, however radical they are, to save ourselves to do that.
Last time I interviewed you was just near the end of the Democratic convention in Philadelphia. We're in a car. We're on our way to
Yeah, we were on the way.
we're with Nina.
Nina, yeah, we're on the way.
I should plug that Nina Turner's show is going to be starting on the Real News pretty soon.
Yeah.
But you were quite deflated. But what had happened in Philly, Sanders hadn't won, and it looked at one point somewhat earlier in the campaign, it looked like he might even win the nomination.
Yeah.
You were pretty down.
Yeah.
Where are you now?
Where am I now?
Yeah.
Well, this is one of the places that I'm at right now, right here. You know, to see to find out what's the next step beyond this. You know, certainly the ideas of him winning the nomination were in some sense romantic ideas as well. The question becomes, in the sense that the crisis is not ended by simply the election of a candidate. The crisis doesn't change. The crisis where are we dealing with the crisis, in the sense that we take power, as I said. How do we manage, or how do we confront the crisis itself, the system itself? And I'm not sure we're there right now. If you want to ask me the truth, I'm not sure we're there. We still want to circle around the wagons. We can't simply circle around the wagons, you know. And certainly, every one of us are waiting for, not every one of us, but some people are waiting for Trump to stumble again. You know, to trip over his own feet, or trip over his own mouth, or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? But those are things that we have to deal with. How do we still build the kind of movement, the transformative movement that so many of us talk about? That, I mean, all the great writers have talked about this during history, the transformative movements, all the thinkers have talked about that transformative movement in real terms, in real people's life, and change their life. And what are we willing to sacrifice? What are we even to sacrifice in order to build those movements, those transformative movements?
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Danny. Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
All right, baby.
Very good, man.